All right, so here's part 2 of your trigonometry lesson. So you've already done the non-calculator part, which we talked about. Remember, with all this trig stuff, you need to remember that phrase every time so you can set things up. And that's, let's go ahead and write that down. Sine, cosine, tangent. Oscar had, which stands for opposite and hypotenuse. A heap, adjacent and hypotenuse, of apples. Opposite over adjacent. All right, so those are your 3 ratios that you need to know. Non-calculator, we talked about the Pythagorean triples, which are those whole numbers, 3, 4, 5, 5, 12, 13, 8, 15, 17, that you need to know. And the big thing that I want you to know, like you should write this pretty big, underline it, highlight it, put a big box around it, is that non-calculator is when they ask you to find sine or cosine or tangent of an angle. And they specifically say, like, you need to use this function, right? So if we look at an example like that, that's this example down here at the bottom. I want you to pause the video, go ahead and draw this triangle and see if you can fill out any information that you know. All right, so hopefully you've realized that this is a Pythagorean triple. This should be one that you remember from our previous lesson, which is going to be a 5, 12, 13. That gives us all the sides. I'm looking for A, and if we go ahead and list out using angle A, my opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. My opposite here is 5, my adjacent is 12, and my hypotenuse is 13. Now they're asking me for the tangent of A, and tangent, if I look back up at my notes up here at the top, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that's going to be 5 over 12. And your final answer when they ask you for that is just that fraction. They're not actually asking you to solve anything. They just want to know what's the tangent of A. The answer is 5 over 12. All right, now let's look at some calculator questions that you're going to see in that Delta Math assignment. All right, so here's an example where you're asked to find x. So pay attention. In this question, it's asking you for you to find x. It's not asking you to find the sine, cosine, or tangent, which means our final answer is going to involve a calculator, and it means that our final answer is going to be like an actual number. All right, now, because this is a mix of sides and angles, so do you see what I'm saying? There are 2 sides in this problem and they give us angles. Because this is a mix of sides and angles, that means we are going to use trig. So we do need to label and decide if we're going to use sine, cosine, or tangent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to circle C. That's going to be my angle. And I know that because that's the angle that they give me here. And I'm going to go ahead and list everything that I know for C. So for C, I'm going to see, do I have opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse? Now, the opposite is, I don't know. I'm going to put that as a question mark because they don't give me anything for opposite. Or maybe I'll just leave it blank. Adjacent, I'm going to see here is x. And the hypotenuse, I just said that backwards. Adjacent is 15. And the hypotenuse is x. So notice on this one, they've given me 2 pieces of information, but they haven't given me the other side, and I can't even do Pythagorean theorem because I don't have enough numbers to do that with as far as sides go. So I notice on this question, they've given me adjacent and hypotenuse. And if I think back, so go back and look at your notes at the top, sine, cosine, and tangent, think about which one uses adjacent and hypotenuse. And you should realize that that's going to be cosine. So I'm going to set up myself an equation. This is going to say cosine of this angle, 20 degrees, because see, I know that C is 20 degrees now, okay? And you can even like label that up here if you want to, that C is 20 degrees. Cosine of 20 degrees equals adjacent, 15, over x. All right? Now, this is where you're going to have to pick up your calculator, and you need to make sure that you know how to hit these buttons correctly. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do in your calculator, you need to make sure you do this tomorrow before you start. In mode, right here on your calculator, you need to push that button, and this menu is going to pop up. Now, it might look a little bit different on yours, but it should be almost identical. You need to change it so that this says right here, so that this says degree, okay? You don't want it to be on radians, you want it to be on degree. So arrow over and hit enter so that the degree is like highlighted in black. All right, so back to our question. What I've done then is I've typed in cosine of 20. This is where I'm going to use my calculator. And if you'll notice, the cosine button is down here. There's sine, cosine, and tangent, so I just hit cosine, and then it let me type 20 in the middle. And we're going to use a few decimal places. So let's go ahead and keep, this is going to sound like a lot, but we're going to keep like 4 decimal places here. It's going to keep you from rounding things wrong. So that means this is 0.9397, I'm rounding, equals 15 over x. All right, so when I do that, now I've got this doesn't look like a proportion, but it is. All right, and so what I mean by that is this is something that you can cross multiply. So to be able to cross multiply, you may remember you need 2 fractions. So I'm going to put this first one over 1, and now we're going to cross multiply. That's going to give me, let's see, this 0.9397x equals 15. My last step is to get x by itself, so I'm going to divide by 0.9397. Divide by 0.9397. And in the end, that gave me that x was equal to 15.96. All right, hopefully you're following along in your calculator. So remember, this 15.96 is that hypotenuse for that triangle. All right, it's important that you know what that belongs to, so make sure that you understand that when you get to the end. Rewatch this problem if you need help with any part of that. All right, so here's one more type of example. This is finding an angle measure. So notice this time, if you read the directions, they're asking me to find the measure of angle B. Again, they're not telling me to use trig. The only reason I know I'm supposed to use trigonometry, which is sine, cosine, or tangent, is because they're asking me for an angle, and they only give me sides of a triangle, okay? Now, we're still going to start this like we've been starting the other problems. I'm going to start with angle B, and I'm going to label the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. Now, the opposite here is 4, the adjacent is 3, and I could figure out the hypotenuse, right? This is a 3, 4, 5, so I can know that. But on this one, I don't actually need to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, let's pretend like that's a side that's not easy to find. I'm just going to use these 2 that are given to me. I notice that this is opposite and adjacent, so I'm going to look at my list for sine, cosine, and tangent at the top of my notes and figure out which one is this. So hopefully you recognize that opposite and adjacent is tangent. So we're going to set this problem up. We're going to do tangent of the angle, which is B, I don't know what the angle is, equals opposite over adjacent. Now, in previous questions, we would have stopped right there because they would have been asking us to find the tangent. But they're not asking us to find tangent, they're asking us to find B. So we need to keep going. Now, this is a little bit weird, so you're just going to have to follow me along, okay? If you need to find an angle, you must use an inverse function. Okay, so what that means, and inverse is, it's like thinking about if you have to something squared and you're trying to undo it, you take the square root. All right, it's the same kind of idea. So for instance, to get B by itself, we're going to end up saying B equals the inverse. It's how we move something to the other side. We make it the inverse of 4/3. All right, we're going to type it in just like that. So let me show you what I mean by that. All right, so to type that in, first of all, I want to do inverse, and if you zoom in and you look at your calculator, inverse is written in blue. It's above each one of these functions, right? This is sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse. And because they're in blue, we're going to hit second first. All right, so we're going to go to second tangent. So that's what I hit first. I did second tangent, and then I typed in the fraction itself. And it's giving me this 53.13 number. Remember, they were asking me to find the measure of angle B. So what you just figured out was that the measure of angle B is 53.13 degrees. And that's going to be your final answer there. All right, make sure you have those notes to use those examples for your work today.